the Linguaverse episode 21, The Language of Revolt, Protest, Code and Coded Speech. Welcome back to the Linguaverse. Some words heal, words that build and words that obey. Then some words refuse. The grammar of defiance every age births a tongue of rebellion, shaped in silence, honed in fear, uttered in fire. Some revolts are written, some are sung, some whispered into the cracks of empire. Language itself has always been a double agent, the voice of kings and the cry of the oppressed. It builds hierarchies with laws and decrees, and topples them with slogans and songs. When I first began exploring language, I thought of it as a mirror. But the deeper I looked, the more I saw it could also be a weapon, a shield and a spark. To speak truth in a time of deceit isn't just noble, it's revolutionary. This is episode 21, The Language of Revolt, Protest, Code and Coded Speech, where we explore the grammar of defiance. Because rebellion doesn't begin with the crowd, it begins with a word, one word that refuses to bend. Every tyrant fears that word. Every empire tries to silence it, yet it always returns, carried on tongues that refuse to forget. If Arc 1 taught us how language shapes reality, and Arc 2 revealed how spells of science, media, and technology bind perception, then Arc 3 is where we turn to the counterspells, the chants, codes, and creative ruptures that speak against the sanctioned tongue. This is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's a rebellion for truth, for integrity, for coherence between word and world. Because at its core, revolt is a linguistic act, a realignment between meaning and reality, and every protest, from the march to the meme, is a restoration of that alignment. Personal reflection, my first revolt. When I trace the roots of my own rebellion, I don't begin in politics. I began in childhood. Long before I stood at rallies, I learned defiance through silence and through escape. When I was sent to my room as a child, the message was clear: be quiet, contain yourself, obey. But something in me rebelled, not against love, but against misinterpretation. I wasn't a bad child, I was a misunderstood one. My behavior, climbing out of the window, running to my grandparents' house, wasn't disobedience. It was a translation, a gesture saying, I can't stay here unseen. That climb was my first protest, my first declaration of autonomy, my first proof that when words fail, movement speaks. In retrospect, I can see the same pattern through my life, that when systems, families, or governments told me what I should think, feel, or say, my nervous system whispered, no, something is wrong here. I didn't have the language yet, but the body did. It sensed injustice long before logic could name it. That's the seed of revolt, an embodied truth-seeking syntax. We don't always choose to be rebels. Sometimes conscience chooses us. The inner rebellion before rebellion becomes collective. It is personal. Before the protest fills the streets, it fills the chest. Every revolution begins inside a human nervous system, trying to reconcile what it knows with what it's told. When propaganda, fear, or trauma push us toward obedience, revolt becomes a biological correction, the body reclaiming its voice. In nervous system language, NSL, rebellion is not chaos, it's coherence restored. When the heart races at injustice, when breath shortens at a lie, when fists clench not from rage but recognition, those are linguistic signals. The body's grammar says truth has been violated. We've all felt it, the pulse that rises when we're told to stay calm while watching cruelty, the quiver when we're gaslit into silence. Revolt, then, is not just political. It's somatic truth-telling. Each act of defiance, from a whispered no to a shouted never again, begins in the alignment between breath, emotion, and meaning. This is why every protest begins with rhythm, chants, songs, and drumming. It's co-regulation in action. Synchronized bodies reclaiming agency through shared resonance. It's what makes the chant feel alive, the mirror neurons firing in harmony, forming a collective nervous system. When we march, we mirror. When we chant, we breathe together. When we sing, we synchronize. Revolt, in essence, is an act of collective nervous system coherence, the moment when truth becomes contagious. The codes of the oppressed throughout history, the silenced have spoken in code. When the powerful own the printing press, the pulpit, and the penalty, subversion finds refuge in metaphor. Let's visit a few of these hidden grammars. Negro spirituals, songs as maps under slavery, African Americans sang in double meanings. Wade in the water instructed escapees to cross rivers and avoid scent-tracking dogs. Follow the drinking gourd hid constellations, the North Star within its melody. Each song was both prayer and plan. To outsiders, they were harmless hymns. To insiders, they were coordinates of liberation. That's linguistic genius, encoding rebellion in reverence. Polari, the queer cant of survival. In 20th century Britain, before homosexuality was legal, queer communities crafted Polari, a hybrid tongue drawn from Italianate slang, Cockney rhyming, and theatre patter. Words like boner, good, naff, bad, or omi, man, turned ordinary speech into camouflage. Polari was more than code. It was communion, a mirror for the unseen, a laughter-laced survival spell. To speak was to say, you see me, I see you. We exist. Samizdat, the Soviet whisper network under Stalinist censorship, banned writers became linguistic smugglers. Manuscripts were copied by hand, passed from reader to reader in secret. Every letter is an act of treason, every paragraph a protest. The word samizdat literally means self-published. But beneath it lies a deeper grammar. If they won't print our truth, we'll print ourselves. Each code, each chant, each whispered joke is rebellion in miniature, proof that speech cannot be fully owned. Syntax of defiance revolutionary language often follows a distinct rhythm. Short, sharp, repetitive, the chant, the slogan, the spray-painted cry. Why? Because revolt thrives in memorability and resonance. It must bypass intellect and reach the body, pulse first, analysis later. Consider no justice, no peace. Power to the people. Black Lives Matter. Each fuses cadence and clarity, mantra-like, breathing truth into tempo. In linguistics, this is performativity, words that do what they say. A chant is not a description, it's an invocation. A protest sign is not commentary, it's spellwork. The syntax of revolt is simple because truth is simple. It's power that complicates. The machinery of silence, every system of control begins by policing language, by redefining words, narrowing meaning, and criminalizing expression. Dictatorships ban slogans, corporations trademark ideas. Algorithms throttle dissenting terms. George Orwell warned us. Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 plus 2 make 4. When language is bent to serve authority, revolt must bend it back. That's where humor, satire, and metaphor enter linguistic aikido, using the oppressor's weight against them. When you can't shout, you joke. When you can't publish, you paint. When you can't explain, you sing. Revolt is adaptive grammar. It survives by mutating. Mirror linguistic solidarity in the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH. Empathy is not abstract, it's embodied reflection. When one person names injustice, those attuned mirror the resonance, not just the idea. That's how revolt spread, not by ideology, but by felt truth. Language acts as a tuning fork. Each utterance invites others into coherence. This is why revolutions need poets as much as planners. A policy may persuade, but a poem possesses. It bypasses defense and touches recognition. Rebellion is contagious because empathy is viral. The voice that trembles becomes the crowd that roars. Protest in the age of algorithms today, revolt wears new clothes. The square is digital, the chant a hashtag. Movements rise on memes, compressed arguments, emotional detonations. A cartoon, a remix, a GIF, all can hold subversive charge. But there's a danger. When algorithms reward outrage, protest risks becoming performance. When attention is currency, rebellion must guard its integrity. Authentic revolt speaks to the nervous system, not through manipulation. It invites resonance, not reactivity. Our task is to discern which words liberate and which merely inflame, which mirrors truth and which mirrors only noise. Activity. The Coded Manifesto 1. Choose a truth you fear to speak. 2. Disguise it in poetry, humor, or metaphor. 3. Read it aloud, feel its hidden pulse. 4. Share it only with those who can hear beneath the words. This is not evasion, it's evolution. Every encrypted truth is a seed, awaiting fertile minds. Reflection. The word that freed you. Recall a time you said no, or whispered enough, or finally named what hurt. That utterance, however small, was your first revolution, a rupture in the spell of silence. Write it down, speak it again. Feel how your spine straightens, breath deepens, and presence returns. That is your native tongue, the dialect of dignity. Rebellion begins in refusal, in the single word that realigns soul and syntax. But to sustain it, we must understand the machinery it opposes. The rhetoric of power, the coded commands of institutions, the algorithms that weaponize speech itself. Hidden tongues, coded speech, and sacred subversion. There's a language that can't be printed, a grammar that refuses permission, a syntax stitched in song, gesture, or glance, hidden in plain sight. Wherever power has sought to silence truth, people have found ways to smuggle meaning through metaphor. They've built linguistic sanctuaries, places where words could breathe, even under watchful eyes. These are the hidden tongues, the dialects of survival, the poetries of the oppressed. They are sacred not because they worship authority, but because they protect the sacred within the self, that untamed core of dignity and perception that no regime, parent, teacher, or algorithm can fully own. The necessity of hiding rebellion isn't always loud. Sometimes it hums. In times of persecution, truth becomes dangerous. To speak plainly can be fatal. So the human spirit, ingenious and adaptive, learns to layer. Every word gains a second life, a shadow meaning, a subtle shimmer visible only to those who share the wound. This is double-voiced speech, a linguistic mask that smiles while its eyes warn. Bakhtin saw this in Dostoevsky. Characters speaking with two voices, one for the surface, one for the soul. Slaves did it in fields, dissidents in cells, lovers in coded letters, mystics in veiled parables. Today, we do it in tweets, memes, and jokes that mean more than they say. This isn't deception, it's self-preservation. It's the art of saying everything in a world that demands silence. Coded languages of survival. The oppressed have always been linguistic engineers, bending the master's tongue to their own maps of freedom. Let's revisit some of the most powerful hidden languages in history, not as artifacts, but as ancestors of subversion, the spiritual cipher songs of the underground. In the brutal landscapes of slavery, where literacy was banned and surveillance constant, enslaved Africans in America turned to song. They built melodic maps, spirituals that sounded like hymns of obedience, but carried encrypted instructions for escape. Wade in the water warned fugitives to move through rivers, masking scent from hounds. Steal away to Jesus doubled as a call to secret meetings. Jesus was code for freedom. Follow the drinking gourd hid star-based navigation, the Big Dipper pointing north. Each lyric was a thread of salvation woven through faith. Every chorus is a compass. Even the melody itself worked magic. Repetition built rhythm, rhythm built courage, courage built flight. It was music as a map, prayer, and password. To outsiders, devotion. To insiders, direction. That's the genius of double-voiced language. It resists capture because it requires connection. Only the attuned can hear. The sacred allegory theology as rebellion under tyranny, even faith must hide. Medieval mystics cloaked social criticism in visions. Enlightenment philosophers used allegory to skirt censors, rewriting theology as philosophy, myth as mirror. During the Soviet era, religious parables smuggled moral dissent. In China's Cultural Revolution, poetry encoded ancestral grief through nature, a plum blossom standing for lineage, a river for the exiled spirit. Even the Bible itself can be read as code, Exodus as slave narrative, Revelation as anti-imperial dream. What looks like prophecy is often protest, a refusal to let oppression define destiny. To hide the truth in a symbol isn't cowardice. It's linguistic aikido, redirecting force rather than meeting it head-on. The dissident whisper samizdat and the Soviet underground under authoritarian rule. Censorship is totalitarian not just in law, but in imagination. To resist is to remember that words can travel without permission. In the USSR, samizdat self-publishing meant typing banned books by hand, page after page, passing them like relics between friends. Every carbon copy is a rebellion. Every smuggled paragraph is an act of faith in truth's persistence. This was literature as lifeline. Each word is a flicker of human consciousness refusing erasure. To risk prison for prose is to believe that language itself is sacred, that to name injustice is to undo it. The comic mask, irony as insurrection oppressed speech, often wears a grin. Humor disarms tyranny by making it absurd. In Soviet kitchens, jokes carried critique. In colonial India, satire outwitted censorship. In Nazi Germany, cabarets mocked the Reich with winked refrains. Irony is rebellion's stealth, laughter as lightning. It's the coded nod saying, I see what you see. Even memes, today's digital descendants of caricature and cartoon, work this way. A single image, endlessly remixed, can convey entire manifestos beneath the radar of control. Ciphers of the digital era. In our algorithmic agora, visibility is currency. But too much truth risks deplatforming, shadowbans, and ridicule. So the subversive spirit adapts again into meme, metaphor, and microcode. A meme becomes a cipher, one image, infinite readings. The Leonardo DiCaprio smug toast meme, used to mock elites, critique hypocrisy, or mirror self-awareness, demonstrates how a single signifier can carry multiple subversive signifieds. Each share re-enchants the image, layering meaning through context. The joke becomes a vessel, humor hiding critique. Satire on TikTok, irony on X, coded hashtags on Instagram. These are today's samizdat, traveling through attention economies instead of carbon paper. But here's the twist. In the digital marketplace, even rebellion can be commodified. So the task of the conscious rebel is discernment, to wield wit without losing integrity. When everything becomes content, protesters must remember its context. The Inversiverse as linguistic cheat code for me. The Inversiverse was never just a project. It was a spell-breaking spell. It began as a whisper, the intuition that language itself had been turned against us. That phrases like mental disorder, new normal, build back better, and misinformation were not neutral. They were enchantments, binding perception and shaping consent. I realized that to fight linguistic sorcery, I had to speak it back, to invert it, mirror it, reveal its mechanisms in motion. The Inversiverse became my cheat code, a rebellion written in the language of the system itself. If propaganda cast spells of fear, I would write spells of awakening. If institutions dictated diagnoses, I would decode their scripts and return meaning to the people they pathologized. Every essay, podcast, and reflection became a counter-enchantment, not to control others, but to restore sovereignty of thought. This was more than theory, it was a living necessity. When the world locked down, I refused to lock my voice. When compliance was sanctified, I sanctified conscience. When narratives demanded obedience, I wrote alternatives, not to persuade, but to empower. That is the heart of sacred subversion. To reveal spells through spells, to use language not as a weapon, but as a mirror, showing each listener their own reflection in the system's syntax. Psychological coding. When the body speaks in metaphor, not all hidden tongues are historical. Some live inside us. Trauma, repression, shame, these are tyrannies of the psyche, and the inner voice, silenced by fear, becomes symbolic. Dreams, slips, symptoms, metaphors, they're all psychic samizdat, messages smuggled past inner sensors. We say, I feel trapped, I'm drowning, I can't breathe. These aren't figures of speech. They're figures of truth, the body's poetry of protest. NSL teaches us to listen not just for words, but for tone, rhythm, and breath. MLH reminds us that empathy decodes what intellect cannot. To truly hear another's subtext, or our own, is to join the ancient lineage of hidden listeners. To mirror resonance is to uncover reality. Sacred subversion, turning the master's tools. True subversion is not destruction, it's reorientation. When oppressors weaponize language, sacred rebels reforge it into prayer. When tyrants brand truth as treason, poets baptize treason as truth. To speak in code is to protect the meaning seed until the soil is ready. To layer your words is to ensure your descendants inherit them unbroken. In mystic traditions, Sufism, Kabbalah, and Gnosticism, coded language served revelation, not concealment. Hidden meanings were invitations, not exclusions, doors only discernment could open. That's the paradox of the sacred tongue. It hides not to deceive, but to preserve depth in a world addicted to surfaces. Reflection prompt: the truth beneath your tongue. What truth in you hides behind metaphor? What story do you tell in symbol because plain speech feels unsafe? Write it, paint it, sing it, but let it breathe. Your subtext is sacred, not because it's secret, but because it's sincere. Every hidden truth is a seed awaiting the sun. Activity: encode your truth. 1. Choose a truth that feels too raw for direct expression. 2. Translate into another medium, a poem, an image, a melody. 3. Notice how your body feels as you craft it, tense or free. 4. Share it or don't. The power lies in the act of encoding. You've just joined the lineage of hidden tongues, those who resist erasure through artistry. Because sometimes the most honest thing we can do is whisper through wonder. Every empire writes its own dictionary, but the human heart always scribbles in the margins. The language of revolt is not born of hate, it's born of hope. Hope that truth, though exiled, will always find a way home. In the next part, we'll trace how these whispers gather into collective storms, how the tongue of protest becomes a chorus, chant, graffiti, code. Because once hidden tongues find harmony, silence itself begins to sing. The walls that speak, protest art and public semiotics. There's a truth that lives on walls before it ever reaches a microphone. Long before hashtags trended or slogans echoed through loudspeakers, rebellion found its first stage in pigment and stone. From the ochre stencils of Paleolithic caves to the painted fists on crumbling city blocks, walls have always carried the voice of those who could not, or would not, be silenced. To revolt is to mark the world, to etch dissent into surfaces that stand when voices are crushed. Every era of resistance has known this language, a tongue spoken through murals, graffiti, symbols, and scars. Whether it was the ancient Roman scribes who scrawled satirical verses in public baths, the secret murals of occupied cities during wartime, or the spray-painted pleas of justice for George Floyd splashed across global metropolises, rebellion leaves a trace that outlives the moment. Walls in their silence become witnesses. They listen when the streets are cleared. They remember what regimes try to erase. From cave walls to city streets, the story of protest art begins not with politics, but with presence. In the dark caves of Lascaux and Altamira, humans pressed hands against stone and blue pigment, an act at once personal and collective. These early markings weren't mere decoration. They were declarations of existence, coded prayers for survival, maybe even early negotiations with the unseen forces governing life. In that sense, the first art was both spell and speech. We were here, we saw, we felt. Fast forward millennia, and the instinct remains. When a young protester scrawls a phrase like "no justice," "no peace on a concrete barrier," the gesture carries the same primal urgency. To leave a mark is to refuse erasure. To inscribe is to insist. Language, when painted, becomes something different, heavier, more embodied. You can feel it in the brush stroke, in the drip of spray paint, in the hurried etching carved by trembling hands. It's a physical claim upon shared space, a statement of belonging and defiance intertwined. Walls become a second skin for society, scarred, tattooed, healed, and re-tattooed through cycles of conflict and renewal. Semiotics of resistance: every image, every scroll is a sign, part of a semiotic system that communicates not only message but mood. A clenched fist doesn't need translation. A broken chain speaks across languages. A red handprint can carry grief, accusation, or warning depending on where it lands. French theorist Roland Barthes argued that images become mythologies, cultural stories encoded in visual form. A mural of a black bird might not simply depict flight. It may mythologize freedom, sacrifice, or the soul's endurance. Similarly, the raised fist in the Black Power movement transcends literal anatomy. It's an archetype of resistance, a signifier fused with emotional charge. Public semiotics, the study of meaning-making in public space, reveals how rebellion uses symbols as short circuits around censorship. When words are forbidden, images become insurgent vocabulary. They thrive precisely because they can't be easily contained. This is what makes graffiti so dangerous to authoritarian systems. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't queue for publication. It erupts where it's least expected, like weeds breaking through asphalt, linguistic insurgency in color and line. Graffiti as democratic dialogue. Graffiti is often dismissed as vandalism, but it might be better understood as unauthorized communication. In cities saturated with billboards and state signage, graffiti reclaims visual territory for the common voice. Each tag, slogan, or mural is a sentence in an ongoing dialogue between people and power. Consider the Berlin Wall. Once a monolith of division, it transformed into an open notebook of dissent. Artists from around the world layered its surface with demands, dreams, and jokes, turning concrete into a chorus. What began as architecture of oppression became a gallery of liberation. That's the paradox of walls built to separate, yet destined to speak. Even contemporary street artists like Banksy harness this paradox. His works, at once playful and piercing, thrive on context. A child frisking a soldier, a protester hurling a bouquet. The city becomes a canvas precisely because it's contested terrain. Meaning emerges in the friction between message and medium, between authority and anonymity. Every graffiti-covered surface is a democratic document, edited daily, open to reply, layered with contradiction. You don't need to agree with every mark to sense the collective heartbeat beneath it. The personal lens, awakening through image, I began noticing this visual language of revolt long before I had words to articulate it. Back in the early 2000s, when I used to attend football matches regularly, I didn't think of myself as observing semiotics, but that's what it was. The contrast between being there and watching from home was a revelation. At the stadium, tension hummed through the crowd, unfiltered. Chants rolled like waves. Colors, banners, and gestures spoke louder than commentary ever could. You could feel solidarity in the vibration of thousands singing in unison, a linguistic symphony without a single orchestrator. At home, though, something shifted. The television reframed everything, inserted ads, added dramatic music, sculpted emotion. The commentary didn't just describe, it directed perception. The chants became background noise, the rawness sanitized into spectacle. That was one of my first glimpses into how media respells reality. In the stadium I participated. On the screen I consumed. It took years and many awakenings to understand that this was more than football. It was an education in public semiotics. The banners in the crowd, the murals on the approach to the ground, the slogans printed on shirts, all were part of a shared vocabulary of identity and power. They bound people to causes, sometimes noble, sometimes tribal, and they hinted at how easily collective energy can be channeled for unity or division alike. Now, when I walk past a mural or graffiti tag, I don't just see color, I see code. I see a conversation between artist and authority, between fear and hope, between voice and wall. And I listen. The mirror message, MLH in visual form, according to the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, communication is not just about sending signals, but about reflecting states. Meaning emerges through mutual resonance, each participant mirroring, consciously or unconsciously, aspects of the other. Protest art enacts this visually. A mural doesn't only express defiance, it invokes it in the viewer. The image becomes a mirror, reflecting the courage, outrage, or sorrow that already lives within those who pass by. When a person stops before a wall painted with the words, "We can't breathe," something mirrors in their chest. The phrase, born of specific suffering, reverberates through collective empathy. The wall becomes a nervous system, pulsing with shared feeling. In this sense, every public artwork is a diagnostic tool for society's state of being. Where you find blank concrete, you often find apathy or suppression. Where walls bloom with color and critique, you find communities unwilling to surrender voice. MLH invites us to read graffiti not as noise, but as a nervous response, an embodied reflection of collective consciousness under pressure. Rebellion in color and form protest art often thrives in the margins, literal and figurative. Under bridges, along rail tracks, across the facades of abandoned factories. Yet its aesthetics are anything but accidental. Color psychology tells us that red evokes urgency, black commands seriousness, and yellow radiates warning or hope. The artist wields hue like a rhetorician wields tone. Shapes, too, carry syntax. Jagged lines fracture comfort, circles imply unity, upward strokes aspire. Typography becomes temperament, block letters shout, cursive scripts whisper. In analyzing this grammar of revolt, we begin to see how the visual and verbal intertwine. A mural reading, "Reclaim the streets," scrawled in rushing diagonal, might feel kinetic, impatient. The same phrase painted in a steady serif could read as a solemn decree. Style in protest is substance. Every aesthetic choice encodes emotion, and emotion, as neuroscience reminds us, drives memory. We recall the mural that made us feel before we remember its text. This is why regimes paint over rebellion quickly. Erasure is an attempt to sever emotional contagion. But memory lingers like pigment beneath primer. You can whitewash a wall, not a witness. The economics of space and speech public walls are contested real estate in the marketplace of attention. Corporations rent them for advertisements. Activists reclaim them for conscience. The same brick that hosts a perfume ad today may carry a climate justice mural tomorrow. This rotation reveals a linguistic economy. Whoever controls the wall controls the narrative. Billboards commodify gaze, graffiti reclaims it. It's a tug of war between commerce and conscience, between language designed to sell and language designed to tell. When we apply this lens, we realize that revolt isn't just against governments. It's against grammar of exploitation. A slogan like buy now demands obedience. A scrawl like wake up demands awareness. Silence, censorship, and the palimpsest every wall tells more than one story. Layers of paint conceal prior protests, much like societies bury inconvenient truths. Archaeologists unearth palimpsests, manuscripts overwritten yet never fully erased. Cities, too, are palimpsests of resistance. Beneath today's advertisements lie ghosts of past rebellions. Censorship itself becomes part of the composition. A blacked-out slogan screams louder than the words it hides. Absence turns into accent. There's power in witnessing erasure, in tracing the outline of what was said. Sometimes the most potent protest is the shadow left behind. Global grammars of defiance across continents, distinct visual dialects of dissent emerge. In Latin America, murals fuse Catholic iconography with socialist slogans, blending sacred and secular tongues. In the Middle East, calligraphy transforms verses into veiled political commentary. In Hong Kong, post-it note mosaics form Lennon walls, ephemeral yet explosive. In South Africa, township graffiti stitches together languages, Zulu, English, and Afrikaans, into hybrid cries for justice. These aren't isolated phenomena. They're dialects of a global grammar, one that conjugates freedom through local idiom. What unites them is not aesthetic, but intention, to reclaim narrative authority from those who monopolize it. Reflection, seeing and being seen. There's a moment familiar to anyone who's ever paused before protest art, that instant when you feel seen by an image that cannot see. It's uncanny, the wall looks back. That reciprocity is the essence of mirrored communication. The artist, absent yet present, has encoded emotion into pigment. The passerby decodes it through resonance, completing the circuit. Meaning doesn't live on the surface, it sparks in the encounter. In that meeting, hierarchy dissolves. Authority yields to empathy. The viewer becomes co-author, personal reflection. For me, this understanding reshaped how I create. When I first began the Inversiverse, I thought of it as education, peeling back illusions through analysis. Over time, I realized it was also mural work. Each episode, each essay, another stroke on the collective wall. I wasn't just describing revolt, I was participating, using language as pigment, syntax as stencil. In that sense, my whole body of work became a form of graffiti, a series of marks against forgetting, words sprayed into the cultural air, ephemeral yet insistent. Like the stadium chants that once vibrated through me, these linguistic murals are call and response. Invitations for others to echo, question, overwrite. Revolt, I've learned, is not always loud. Sometimes it's simply leaving a sign where silence once stood. Practice, designing a symbol of freedom. Take a moment to imagine a single image that captures what freedom feels like in your body. Don't reach first for national flags or well-worn emblems. Begin with sensation. Is it expansion? Warmth? Lightness? Ground that feeling in form. Perhaps it's a spiral growth without an endpoint. Perhaps a bridge, a connection across divides. Perhaps an open eye, awareness unshuttered. Sketch it, paint it, describe it in words if you must. What matters is not artistic polish but personal truth. This is your sigil of sovereignty, a mirror of the freedom you seek to build. Pin it somewhere visible. Let it remind you that every glance can be a conversation with courage. The walls that speak are not confined to concrete. They live in our screens, our skins, our stories. Each time we voice dissent, we add another layer to humanity's mural of becoming. And just as ancient handprints still whisper across caves, the marks we make today, in paint, in pixel, in poem, will one day testify. We were here, we saw, we felt, we spoke. Revolt, after all, is the art of remembering out loud. The algorithmic rebellion, speech under surveillance. Every age of rebellion must confront its gatekeepers. In the past, they were monarchs, inquisitors, and censors wielding ink and sword. Today, they wear different robes composed of code, policy, and algorithm. The battleground is no longer the marketplace or the street alone, but the timeline, the feed, the trending page. The walls still speak, but now they glow. And those who listen or dare to paint upon them must learn a new kind of literacy. This is the era of the algorithmic rebellion, where every word, image, and gesture is filtered through unseen architectures that measure, rank, and reward. Power no longer simply silences, it sorts. It decides what is visible, what is amplified, and what is shadowed. And so to revolt in the digital age is to wage a quiet war of perception, to speak clearly in a hall of mirrors. Code as censor. When we post, tweet, or share, we rarely think of the gatekeepers behind the screen. Yet every platform, from social networks to search engines, runs on a web of algorithms designed to curate our reality. These invisible editors determine what rises to the top of our feeds, what disappears into obscurity, and what words trigger suppression. In traditional censorship, power said no. In algorithmic censorship, it says nothing. It simply rearranges the stage so your voice is inaudible. No public trial, no decree, just absent, the quietest erasure in history. The philosopher Byung-Chul Han describes our era as one of psychopolitics, where control no longer operates through prohibition but through persuasion, self-disclosure, and voluntary participation. We are not forced into silence, we are guided toward irrelevance. The algorithm does not ban our rebellion, it needs only to bury it. When I began speaking openly during the COVID era, questioning narratives, seeking truth beneath the noise, I saw this firsthand. Posts vanished without explanation. Reach plummeted. Messages flagged as sensitive. It was as if an unseen hand rearranged the room each time I entered, dimming the lights just enough that few could see. During a period of 22 months, I received 18 30-day bans from interacting on Facebook. I could only view, no ability to comment, post, or reply. At the time, they publicly stated they were not censoring people. I received ridicule for this suggestion alone when I had periods. I could use the site that I wanted to show people, more was being deliberately withheld. Called myself and other truthers, liars, not only discredited, had my integrity questioned every day. It has since become public knowledge that Facebook, under their claims of duress and coercion from the Joe Biden administration, were forced to enable such actions on the platform. To me, this is lies, and Facebook has and still does comply, and is complicity with crimes against humanity. The platform still censors. Their words and actions are incongruent. They lie and continue to lie. I accept it for that it is. And yet, like graffiti sprayed on a freshly painted wall, truth found ways to return. The more the algorithm tried to conceal, the more creative our language became. We learned to speak in metaphor, humor, and code, linguistic camouflage against digital surveillance. This too is rebellion, to outwit the filter, to craft phrases that slip past the centuries, carrying meaning hidden in plain sight. Hashtags and hashed souls. In digital protest, a hashtag is both a rally cry and a breadcrumb trail. It gathers voices into temporary nations, porous, ephemeral, yet potent. But it is also a double-edged spell. The same tag that unites the crowd also maps it. Visibility becomes vulnerability. Consider Me Too, a movement born from courage and confession, spreading like wildfire across timelines. It revealed systemic abuse and gave survivors a chorus. Yet its viral ascent also made it measurable, predictable, and commodifiable. Brands adopted its language. Institutions repackaged its ethos into slogans. The algorithm, indifferent to justice, simply rewarded engagement. What began as a revolution risks becoming a trend. And trends, by nature, decay. That is the paradox of the digital age. Every uprising leaves data trails that can be harvested, sold, or weaponized. Our cries for freedom feed the same systems that surveil us. To revolt today is to post with both passion and prudence, to remember that the walls have ears, and the servers have memories, shadowbans and ghost voices. There is a particular loneliness that comes from being shadowbanned. You speak, and the words vanish into a void, no echo, no reply. Others scroll past, unaware you even exist. It's the modern equivalent of exile, only you remain in the city, unseen behind an invisible veil. For dissenters, this is the new punishment, not imprisonment, but algorithmic obscurity. What fascinates and unsettles me is how this mirrors older forms of spiritual suppression. In medieval times, heretics were declared anathema, excommunicated, and their names erased from the community. Today, digital heretics face a softer anathema, posts quietly deranked, comments hidden, visibility throttled. It's a sophisticated cruelty, silence disguised as choice. You are technically free to speak, but practically unheard. And so we adapt. Like mystics in hostile empires, we learn the art of the coded message. Memes become parables. Irony becomes armor. Humor carries critique. In the Inversiverse project, I often describe this as revealing the spell through spell work. To expose manipulation, we must first enchant, to meet the sorcerer in his own tongue. When platforms demand compliance, we respond with allegory, irony, and layered meaning. We refuse the binary of silence or scream. We whisper in symbols that only the awake will understand. Outrage as currency. In this marketplace of attention, emotion is the new economy. The algorithm doesn't care about truth or goodness. It hungers for engagement. And nothing feeds it like outrage. Studies confirm what experience already tells us. Posts that provoke anger, fear, or moral disgust are shared far more widely than those that invite nuance or reflection. The digital colosseum rewards conflict. Calm voices vanish in the roar. Each scroll, each click, each heated reply is a transaction, micropayments in the currency of adrenaline. The more polarized we become, the richer the platform grows. This is linguistic colonization by arousal. Our nervous systems, once designed for survival, are now monetized for retention. To speak in anger is not always wrong. Righteous fury can fuel justice. But when outrage becomes default, discourse dissolves into spectacle. Nuance, that quiet artisan of truth, is priced out of the market. And so, rebellion in the age of algorithms requires regulation. Not the censorship of spirit, but the centering of the state. This is where nervous system language, NSL, becomes vital. It teaches us to speak from groundedness, not reactivity, to pause before posting, to breathe before broadcasting. Regulation becomes revolution. Each calm word is an act of defiance against architectures designed to inflame. When we master our physiology, we reclaim authorship. We become participants, not puppets. Emotional hijack and linguistic loops. The body doesn't distinguish between a digital threat and a physical one. When confronted with aggression online, the amygdala lights up, cortisol surges, breath shortens. We enter fight or flight, yet there is nowhere to run. The screen holds us captive in cycles of stimulation and depletion. This is the genius of algorithmic control. It turns attention into addiction. Each notification is a dopamine drip. Each argument is a chemical spike. And language, our oldest tool of liberation, becomes the leash. We argue not to understand, but to self-soothe. We scroll not to learn, but to escape. In this feedback loop, words lose their weight. Insults inflate, empathy deflates. The economy of meaning collapses into inflationary babble. The antidote? Slowness. To type as one might carve stone, each word deliberate, each sentence an act of stewardship. To reintroduce sacred pacing into speech. NSL offers this through embodied pauses, conscious breath, and the simple practice of asking, what state am I speaking from? Because rebellion without regulation risks becoming reaction, noise mistaken for voice. Mirrors in the machine, the mirror linguistic hypothesis, MLH, suggests that meaning arises not from assertion but reflection, from the resonant field between speaker and listener. But what happens when the listener is a machine? Algorithms now complete our sentences, predict our phrases, and mimic our tone. In doing so, they mirror us, but shallowly, statistically. This creates a hall of mirrors where human expression reflects simulacra. We risk becoming parrots of prediction, echoing what the system expects, afraid to deviate lest we lose visibility. Linguistic diversity narrows, dialects of dissent fade. True mirroring, by contrast, requires empathy, a shared pulse. The machine can model correlation, not compassion. So rebellion in this context means insisting on authentic deviation. To write what won't rank, to say what won't sell, to risk obscurity for integrity. An unoptimized sentence is a seed of sovereignty. COVID, compliance, and moral speech. During the COVID years, I witnessed the algorithmic apparatus merge with moral panic. Platforms flagged dissent as danger, nuance as misinformation. Words like question or choice became suspicious. Fear became lingua franca. I couldn't stay silent, not because rebellion thrilled me, but because conscience compelled me. I knew what obedience felt like, the constriction in the chest, the quiet betrayal of self. I'd tasted it in childhood when punishment taught compliance before understanding, and I'd sworn not to repeat that pattern. So I spoke carefully, sometimes cryptically, always courageously. Not every message landed, some provoked hostility, but the act itself was liberation. Each syllable reclaimed coherence between belief and expression. That season taught me that rebellion is not rage, it is responsibility. The courage to speak the truth, even when the crowd hisses. The humility to keep learning, even when vindicated. It's easy to fight systems out there. Harder to confront the systems within, the inner algorithm. The most insidious censor is not the platform, but the psyche. Years of social conditioning build an inner algorithm, a pattern of self-editing designed to maximize approval and minimize threat. We tailor our tone to avoid conflict, dilute our passion to seem polite, and bury our dissent beneath diplomacy. The system doesn't need to silence us. We pre-silence ourselves. But rebellion begins in the nervous system. When we sense that familiar flutter of fear before speaking truth and breathe through it, we rewire the code. Each regulated word erases a line of learned obedience. NSL reframes courage as coherence. Grounded breath, steady tone, open heart. These become our encryption keys. They allow truth to pass through the firewall of fear. In this sense, every act of authentic speech is an algorithmic hack, rewriting internal code to restore sovereignty. Digital camouflage. Meme as modern cipher humor too becomes a weapon. In repressive climates, digital or political, irony disguises dissent. A meme shared with a wink can smuggle critique past censors. Like medieval jesters mocking kings under the guise of comedy, today's satirists thread truth through laughter. During lockdowns, I watched as communities birthed whole dialects of coded humor. Emojis replaced banned words, puns mass protest. Sarcasm softened subversion. This is linguistic jiu-jitsu, using the system's own appetite for amusement to deliver critique. The meme, in its brevity, carries density, a compressed scream disguised as a smirk. But even here, caution. What begins as satire can slide into cynicism. Irony protects, but prolonged use numbs. The goal is not endless mockery, but momentary revelation. Laughter as lightning, illuminating the lie. Regulating the rebellion NSL in action to rebel sustainably, one must not burn out. Outrage, while catalytic, consumes. Grounding, by contrast, generates. In practice, NSL invites rebels to pause before posting, to sense their breath, to locate words not in reaction but resonance. A simple exercise. Before responding to provocation, inhale deeply through the nose, exhale slowly through the mouth. Feel the body settle. Ask, what truth needs speaking and what just seeks discharge? Then choose a language aligned with integrity, not impulse. Such speech carries a different vibration, calmer, clearer, harder to co-opt. It is rebellion that heals rather than harms. 24-hour linguistic audit. To grasp how algorithms shape our state, try this. Spend a single day noting every digital message you encounter, headlines, tweets, ads, videos. For each, jot down the emotion it stirs, anger, fear, envy, hope. At day's end, review your log. Which emotions dominated? Which left residue, tension, fatigue, distraction? Which restored curiosity, compassion, and courage? You'll begin to see the emotional architecture of your feed, the invisible grammar guiding attention. Awareness itself is revolt. Once you see the strings, you're less likely to dance them. The rebellion reframed algorithmic control thrives on unconsciousness. Its antidote is awakened articulation, language spoken from presence, guided by purpose. Every time we resist reactive posting, every time we craft sentences anchored in empathy, every time we choose silence over spectacle, we subvert the system. This rebellion is quieter than marches, subtler than slogans, yet its ripple is vast. Because when enough people speak from coherence, the algorithm's economy of outrage collapses. Calm becomes contagious. Truth trends in unexpected ways. We may never fully dismantle the digital colossus, but we can starve it of what it craves most, our unguarded attention. To rebel then is to reclaim breath, reclaim bandwidth, reclaim the right to mean what we say. Moral speech in a mechanized world. Ask yourself, when have I shaped my words to please the feed, not my truth? What tone do I default to under pressure, fight, flight, freeze, fawn? How might I breathe differently next time to let clarity lead? Remember, in a world that rewards reaction, reflection is revolution. Practice the clear word. Choose one message you wish to share, something heartfelt, vital. First, write it instinctively. Then, run it through an AI optimization tool or social media scheduler. Observe the changes. Does it suggest stronger hooks, emotional triggers, or buzzwords? Now, compare versions. Which feels more authentic? Which mirrors your actual state? Which one would you trust if you were the reader? This exercise reveals the subtle coercion of algorithmic aesthetics, how optimization can sand away sincerity. Rebellion may mean choosing the imperfect but real world over the polished but hollow one. Speech under surveillance demands courage, creativity, and calm. The algorithm may be vast, but it is not omnipotent. Its power ends where awareness begins. Each time we breathe before we broadcast, each time we choose nuance over noise, each time we refuse to let metrics dictate meaning, we chip at its throne. In this quiet, sustained rebellion, words become sacred again, not tools for traction, but vessels of truth. The algorithm counts clicks, but the soul counts coherence. And coherence, once spoken, echoes far beyond the feed. The inner revolt, rewriting the self. All revolutions, however loud they sound, begin in silence. Not the silence of apathy, but the stillness before a heartbeat changes rhythm. The moment you realize the orders you've been following no longer fit the shape of your soul. Every act of rebellion against the world is seeded in a whisper within. This isn't who I am anymore. Before placards are raised, before slogans are sung, there's an inner voice clearing its throat. That is the heart of the inner revolt, the uprising of authenticity against indoctrinated obedience. The scripts we inherit long before we speak our first word, language speaks to us. We inherit vocabularies of value. What is good, what is bad, what is normal. We learn which tones soothe adults, which words earn smiles, and which silences keep peace. By the time we reach adulthood, much of our identity is scaffolded by phrases we never chose. Be polite. Don't rock the boat. Boys don't cry. That's just how the world works. Each maxim is a little brick in the wall of compliance. And yet, beneath those borrowed sentences, a murmur persists. The child who asked why still waits for an answer. In my own life, I can trace this inheritance through moments that felt small at the time, yet monumental in hindsight. When I was sent to my room as a child for speaking out, I didn't just lose freedom of movement. I lost a little faith in my own voice. My instinct wasn't to argue, but to leave, to climb out, walk to my grandparents, and seek the sanctuary of someone who'd listen. That, though I didn't know it then, was my first protest. Not a tantrum, not defiance for its own sake, but a pilgrimage toward understanding. Language hadn't yet given me the grammar for dissent, so I spoke in footsteps. Even now, I see that child in countless adults, people who learn to obey without question, who swallowed opinions to survive, who internalized scripts written by fear, family, or faith. Many carry these lines like sacred texts, never realizing they can edit the page. To revolt within is to pick up the pen. The trauma of compliance obedience is not neutral. For some, it's a safety strategy, a way to avoid punishment, rejection, or shame. For others, it becomes a wound, the slow erosion of agency under the weight of should. Psychologists studying fawning responses, a lesser-known cousin of fight, flight, and freeze, describe how trauma can condition us to appease. We become fluent in self-betrayal, translating every impulse into politeness. Our nervous systems learn to prioritize others' comfort over our truth. Each time we silence an opinion, defer a desire, or suppress a boundary, we reinforce the circuitry of submission. Over the years, this becomes the inner censor, a voice that asks permission before passion, validation before vision. And yet, as trauma theorists like Bessel van der Kolk remind us, the body keeps the score. Suppressed truth doesn't vanish, it lodges. Tight shoulders, clenched jaws, chronic fatigue, each a physical protest. The Soma's graffiti spelling let me speak. In that sense, the body is the first rebel. When words fail, it signals. When obedience becomes unbearable, it trembles, aches, or erupts. Every panic attack, every inexplicable exhaustion can be read as a strike by the laboring self, refusing to work under unjust orders. To heal, then, is not to become endlessly calm, but to learn the language of these uprisings, to translate symptom into message, reaction into request. Cognitive dissonance, the language of division. The philosopher Leon Festinger coined the term cognitive dissonance to describe the tension between conflicting beliefs. But for many of us, it's more than a concept, it's the sound of our own inner dialogue at war. We say one thing and feel another. We believe in freedom, yet live by fear. We preach honesty, yet swallow truth. This dissonance hums beneath countless conversations in politics, relationships, and even self-talk. The mind constructs elaborate justifications to muffle the discord. I'm fine. This is normal. Everyone feels this way. But deep down, the body knows. When I look back, I see decades of this dissonance, sensing something was wrong in the world, yet lacking language to name it. Watching manipulative systems flourish and being told they were benevolent. Feeling an urgency that logic couldn't validate. For years, I tried to translate those sensations into socially acceptable speech, but conformity has its own dialect, one that often mispronounces truth. Only later did I realize that the confusion I felt wasn't madness, it was misalignment. I wasn't broken. I was bilingual, fluent in the grammar of intuition, but trapped in the syntax of indoctrination. Rebellion began when I stopped trying to make sense of the system and started making sense of it. Awakening as preparation. When the world locked down, so did its language. Phrases like new normal, essential, non-essential, and safe became mantras of mass obedience. Words that once carried nuance were sharpened into tools of compliance. Yet in that silence, stripped of routine, flooded with uncertainty, something stirred. For many, myself included, the pandemic became both apocalypse and awakening. As I watched familiar institutions reveal their fragility, I began to see my own conditioning. The reflex to obey, to trust authority, to suppress dissent. These were not virtues but vestiges. They were echoes of classrooms that prized conformity over curiosity, workplaces that rewarded politeness over passion, and societies that equated compliance with morality. My rebellion didn't erupt, it emerged. It rose through stillness, through long hours of reflection, through the reactivation of a childhood intuition that had always whispered, "There's more to this than they're telling you." And as the external world constricted, my inner world expanded. I studied, I wrote, I connected dots that had once seemed scattered. Looking back now, I see that period not as chaos but a curriculum. A rigorous initiation prepared me for the work I now do, crafting language that questions, heals, and awakens. Revolt, I've learned, isn't about rage, it's about readiness. The body's protest, every rebellion has its march, and in the inner revolt, that march is somatic. Notice the tightening chest before you agree to something you don't want. The shallow breath when you swallow anger. The heavy stomach when you say yes but mean no. These are protest songs sung through fascia and nerve. Somatic therapists often invite clients to track sensations as messages, not symptoms to fix, but signals to decode. A fluttering heart might mean fear, but it can also mean excitement, a call to leap rather than retreat. A lump in the throat might be grief, but also the dammed-up river of words unsaid. To listen to the body is to join the demonstration already happening within. To place a hand on the sternum and whisper, "I hear you," is to step into solidarity with the self. This too is nervous system language, not the articulation of ideas, but the attunement of state. Before changing the world, we must re-establish diplomatic relations with our own skin. Rebellion as healing, many associate rebellion with destruction. But true revolt dismantles only what denies life. It's less riot, more realignment. In My Inner Child Was Broken, I explored how disobedience, when guided by conscience, becomes medicine. The moment a child refuses unjust authority, they protect a spark of sovereignty. The tantrum, the slammed door, the escape to a grandparent's house, these are not moral failings but early rehearsals for integrity. As adults, we reenact these rebellions in subtler ways, leaving toxic jobs, setting boundaries, refusing silence. Each act is a vote for self-trust. Healing, then, is not submission to a therapeutic regime, but participation in a revolution of truth. It's the daily overthrow of inherited lies. To say I was hurt in a culture that glorifies stoicism is rebellion. To cry in public is rebellion. To rest, to forgive, to dream, rebellion. Every healed wound is a toppled tyrant. Language, as liberation words, are the scaffolding of reality. Rewrite them, and you renovate existence. Consider how many oppressive systems rely on linguistic sleight of hand. Colonization framed as civilizing, censorship as safety, exploitation as opportunity. To accept such terms uncritically is to inhabit the oppressor's lexicon, but to rename is to reclaim. When we say healing instead of fixing, boundary instead of barrier, choice instead of compliance, we redraw the map of meaning. In my own work, The Inversiverse, Unfiltered Human, and the Linguaverse, I've sought to expose these spells by casting counterspells, to use language not as a leash but a lantern, to show that every definition is a negotiation, and we are all authors. The inner revolt begins on the tongue. Unlearning indoctrinated speech. Listen closely to your daily language. How often do you quote your oppressor? Phrases like, I'm not good enough, it's just the way it is, or who am I to say, are linguistic fossils, remnants of hierarchies internalized. Each one is a tiny monument to power long departed, yet still haunting the landscape of the mind. Unlearning them requires both curiosity and compassion. You can't bully yourself into freedom. You must dialogue. When an old phrase arises, ask, whose voice is this? A parent, a teacher, a culture? Then gently reply, thank you for your service. I'm rewriting this line now. It may sound strange, but this conversational method, part of internal family systems therapy, honors the origins of each inner voice while restoring authorship to the present self. Revolution, after all, shares a root with revolve. We turn the wheel not to destroy the cart, but to steer it anew. The courage of authenticity. To live authentically in a conformist culture is an act of sustained defiance. Authenticity is not raw expression at all costs. It's congruence, the alignment of word, deed, and essence. It requires discernment. Some truths are sacred, not for spectacle. Others must be shouted from rooftops. Wisdom lies in knowing which is which. For me, authenticity meant refusing the mask of neutrality. It meant admitting that my creativity was not apolitical, that every sentence I wrote carried moral voltage. It meant embracing spiritual experiences once dismissed as irrational, recognizing them as integral chapters of a larger coherence. The cost was occasional misunderstanding, even ridicule. The reward was peace, the quiet certainty that my inner compass, though unconventional, points true. Rebellion without authenticity is chaos. Authenticity without rebellion is captivity. Together they form integrity. Rewriting the inner constitution, nations codify values in constitutions. Individuals can do the same. To rewrite the self is to draft a new charter of being. Start with preamble, I am not who I was told to be. I am who I choose to become. Then list your articles, guiding principles drawn from lived truth. Article 1, my worth is inherent, not earned. Article 2, my voice matters even in trembling. Article 3, obedience is optional, conscience is command. Article IV, I will speak from regulation, not reactivity. Article 5, I will rewrite any word that wounds. Read it aloud. Feel how your body responds. That resonance, the flutter, the warmth, the steadiness, is ratification. This document isn't carved in stone, it's sung in breath. Amendments welcome. Each revision is another revolution. Reflection prompt, ask yourself, which inherited phrases still govern your behavior? When did you last silence yourself to maintain peace? How might your body be protesting compliance today? What truth is trembling at the edges of your throat, waiting for release? Notice the sensations that arise. These are your rebels, small, insistent, loyal to freedom. Activity. Rewrite the phrase. Choose one phrase you inherited from family, culture, or circumstance that no longer fits. Examples. Don't get too big for your boots. You can't change the system. It's selfish to put yourself first. Now rewrite it in your own voice. Stand tall. The world needs your stature. Every system was built by hands. Hands can rebuild. Caring for myself equips me to care for others. Speak it aloud. Feel the shift, cognitive, emotional, somatic. That sensation is sovereignty returning. The ongoing revolution rebellion is not a one-time coup but a daily practice. Each sunrise offers another chance to choose truth over comfort, curiosity over conformity. Some days revolution looks like protest, others like prayer. Sometimes it's marching in the streets, sometimes it's whispering no more in the mirror. The goal isn't perpetual conflict, but perpetual awakening, to live so consciously that indoctrination has nowhere left to hide. And when enough individuals rewrite their inner scripts, society's story shifts, language evolves, laws follow. The world, like the self, is edited into greater coherence. To revolt within is to remember who you were before obedience. To rewrite yourself is to author the freedom no system can confiscate. And when you speak from that place, calm, clear, courageous, the world doesn't just hear your words. It feels your liberation, reclaiming the word, building the language of liberation. Every revolution, if it is to last, must build. Destruction clears ground, creation roots it. The inner revolt frees you from the old scripts, but reclaiming the word is how you begin to write the new world into being. Language is not merely descriptive, it is generative. The words you choose to inhabit shape the landscapes of your reality. And when you change your tongue, you change your destiny. In earlier episodes, we've seen how language has been wielded as a weapon, to colonize, to coerce, to conceal. But here, we turn the blade back into a tool, carving out meaning, planting seeds of renewal, chiseling truth from the stone of silence. This is not just a philosophical exercise. It's an act of rebellion in a civilization addicted to illusion, a society that spins slogans instead of sense, metrics instead of meaning. To reclaim the word is to repossess your most sacred resource, voice. And voice, when aligned with body, breath, and being, when rooted in regulation rather than reaction, becomes not just sound, but signal. It vibrates coherence into chaos. It becomes a language of liberation. The word as home every culture has myths about the origin of speech, the divine spark that let thought become sound. In Genesis, creation begins with utterance. Let there be light. In Hindu cosmology, the universe vibrates into being with Om. These stories aren't relics, they're reminders. Speech is sacred. When you speak, you create worlds. But somewhere along the line, many of us were evicted from our own language. Colonial powers stripped tongues from nations. Dogmas pried metaphors from mystery. Bureaucracies flattened poetry into policy. Even on a personal level, trauma can exile us from our voice. We learn to whisper to survive. To reclaim the word is to return home, to dwell again in the language that mirrors your soul's contours. For me, that homecoming has been gradual. The Inversiverse began as a map back to myself, a guidebook for those who sensed something was off in the collective speech, who felt the dissonance of being fluent in systems that starved them. Every episode, every paragraph was a brick in rebuilding that linguistic shelter, a place where nuance, courage, and compassion could coexist. Home, after all, isn't just where you live, it's how you speak to yourself, from colonized mind to conscious mouth. The first empire you must decolonize is your vocabulary. Look closer. How many of your daily words are imports from ideologies that do not serve you? Productivity is worth, failure as shame, success as accumulation, happiness as performance. Each borrowed term carries freight, assumptions, expectations, invisible obligations. Colonization isn't only geographic, it's grammatical. The conquest of meaning happens quietly, through definitions we don't remember agreeing to. When the mind is colonized, even rebellion risks using the master's metaphors. When you argue with oppressors in their syntax, you reinforce their structure. True liberation requires linguistic sovereignty, a refusal to speak in inherited chains. That doesn't mean inventing an entirely new language, though new words help. It means repurposing the old tongue, bending it toward truth, infusing it with breath until it speaks in harmony with the body again. For me, this reclamation began with slowing down, interrogating why certain phrases felt dissonant. I'd feel it physically, a tightening, a subtle nausea, a sense of shrinkage. That discomfort was data, the body saying, this word doesn't belong here. The body knows. It knows when language lies. It knows when rhetoric is rehearsed. It knows when a word is weaponized against your nature. To reclaim the word, trust the translator beneath the intellect, the heart, the gut, the tingling skin. Your nervous system is the original lexicographer. The body knows. Somatic literacy as liberation. Long before we learned phonetics, we spoke through posture, breath, and gaze. The body, not the mouth, was our first instrument of meaning. Today, in the age of algorithmic attention and textual overload, that ancient literacy lies dormant, yet it remains our surest compass. When I speak of nervous system language, NSL, I refer to this, the practice of attuning to physiological cues before, during, and after speech. It's a way of reclaiming rhythm, tone, and timing from the mechanized pace of modern discourse. In protest movements, you can see NSL at work unconsciously. Crowds synchronize chants, heartbeats rise together, adrenaline becomes a collective chorus. But imagine if we harnessed that same somatic awareness in quieter revolts, conversations, classrooms, boardrooms, and families. To breathe before responding is an act of rebellion against reactivity. To pause until the tremor passes is resistance against manipulation. To speak only when coherence returns is how the body reclaims authority from fear. The body knows when speech is true. You feel expansion, resonance, release. It knows when words betray you, the constriction, the tension, the internal flinch. The task, then, is not to silence the body, but to restore its veto power. Let it counsel your tongue. Let liberation begin beneath the sternum. In my own journey, I've noticed that the words which endure, those readers and listeners remember, are the ones that originated below the intellect. They didn't come from analysis, but alignment. They weren't crafted, they were felt. Every meaningful sentence carries a pulse. To reclaim the word, you must reclaim that heartbeat. From consumer to creator language has been commodified. Every tweet, caption, and catchphrase is weighed for engagement, optimized for attention, traded for clicks. Words, once carriers of wisdom, now function as currency. In such a marketplace, silence is subversive, reflection, radical. To reclaim the word is to step out of linguistic capitalism, to cease treating expression as a transaction. This is the transition from consumer to creator, from quoting others to crafting your own metaphors, from parroting trends to articulating timeless truths. When you stop consuming words solely for stimulation and begin creating them from stillness, something miraculous happens. Your speech regains sanctity. It ceases to sell and begins to serve. In Unfiltered Human, I explored the raw edges of this shift, how stripping language of pretense can reveal veins of shared humanity. Vulnerability, after all, is not just emotional honesty, it's semantic integrity. It's refusing to curate your vocabulary for applause. The world doesn't need more slogans, it needs more sincerity. Every genuine sentence is an act of reconstruction in a culture of simulation. The grammar of liberation grammar is not merely rules for sentence structure, it's an architecture for thought. Consider how English privileges nouns, things, over verbs, processes. We speak of being rather than becoming, of ownership rather than relationship. The structure itself mirrors a worldview, static, possessive, hierarchical. Liberatory grammar would emphasize connection over control, reciprocity over possession. Indigenous languages, for instance, often encode ecological awareness directly into syntax. In Potawatomi, Robin Wall Kimmerer notes, more than 70% of words are verbs. The world is alive, always acting. To reclaim the word is to borrow such wisdom, to build grammar that mirrors living systems. Even small shifts matter, from having to holding, from making to co-creating, from taking to receiving, from using to listening. Each substitution softens domination into dialogue. In the Inversiverse, I call this mirror linguistics, a language that reflects relationships rather than reasserts control. Words become mirrors, not weapons. Sentences spiral like ecosystems, not ladders. Linguistic liberation begins in syntax, in choosing structures that honor into being. The poetics of protest is often loud, but its deepest power lies in poetry. Tyrants fear rhyme because rhyme remembers. It carries rhythm across generations, embedding resistance in melody. A slogan can be censored, a song cannot be unheard. Think of spirituals sung by enslaved Africans, coded routes to freedom beneath hymns of hope. Think of graffiti blooming on concrete, petals of protest sprayed by unseen gardeners. Think of memes that mock power with humor sharper than any blade. To reclaim the word is to reclaim play, the trickster's art of saying truth slant. Humor, irony, metaphor, these are not evasions, they're evolutions. They allow truth to travel where literal speech is surveilled. In my own work, wordplay has often served as a smuggler. The Inversiverse itself is a pun, inversion as both rebellion and revelation. By flipping the meaning, we expose what was hidden beneath the surface. Poetry is protest disguised as beauty. Every metaphor is a jailbreak. Building a lexicon of justice liberation requires vocabulary. Without words, injustice hides in abstraction. Audre Lorde wrote, "What is most important must be spoken. But to speak it, we must name it." Patriarchy, gaslighting, and intersectionality, each once obscure terms, now anchor discourse. Every new word is a torch, yet we must also coin words for wholeness. Revolutions that focus only on wounds forget what they're fighting for. So let's add to the lexicon. Each term is a stone in the temple of a freer future. Your task, build your own glossary. 10 words that define the world you wish to inhabit. Write them, speak them, live them. Language doesn't just describe reality, it rehearses it. The role of articulation in collective healing. When individuals reclaim their words, communities reclaim their narratives. Group dialogues, whether in therapy circles, activism, or education, thrive when each member speaks from regulation and listens from reverence. This is collective NSL, a nervous system attunement across many bodies. Imagine town halls where pauses are honored, debates where breath leads logic, media where tone matters as much as text. This isn't utopian fantasy, it's linguistic hygiene. Incoherent communication breeds conflict. Coherent communication cultivates communion. The Inversiverse was born from this recognition that mass confusion stems from linguistic pollution. By cleaning our words, we cleanse our worlds. When speech aligns with truth, and truth aligns with physiology, trust is restored. Healing follows. Integration. The body of work has protest each project I've created. The Inversiverse, Unfiltered Human, My Inner Child Was Broken, and the Linguaverse has been a brick in this cathedral of reclamation. The Inversiverse exposes indoctrinated language, flipping illusion into insight. Unfiltered Human speaks unvarnished truth, dissolving shame through candor. My Inner Child Was Broken reclaims innocence from silence, turning pain into pedagogy. The Linguaverse weaves all into a living theory, a grammar of awakening. Together, they form a trilogy of tongues, the protest, the prayer, and the practice. Each line written was a refusal to remain mute under manipulation. Each reflection shared a flare in the dark, signaling others to find their voice. This is what I mean by constructive revolt, creation as resistance. When you live in your own language, tyranny has no translation. The practice of sacred speech, to reclaim the word, speak less but mean more. Before utterance, pause, feel your body. Ask, is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If yes, exhale and let the sound carry consciousness. If not, let silence speak instead. Sacred speech isn't formal or archaic, it's aware. It treats language as living. It honors each syllable as a seed. Practice daily rituals. Morning, set intention, one word to embody. Midday, mindful check-in. How have I spoken? Evening, gratitude, 3 words that nourished. These are not chores but choices. small revolutions in rhythm. Each conscious word rethreads the connection between self and soul, between humans and earth. Reflection prompt. Which words today felt like home? Which ones betrayed your truth? How does your body respond to sincerity versus performance? What vocabulary would liberation invent through you? Listen beneath the answers. The body knows. Activity. Create your freedom lexicon. List 10 words that define the world you want to live in. Personal, social, spiritual. For each, write why it's priceless, what truth it protects, and what future it promises. Examples. 1. Integrity, because coherence is peace. 2. Wonder, because curiosity dismantles fear. 3. Justice, because fairness is love in law. 4. Presence, because awareness is freedom. 5. Play, because joy is resilience. 6. Silence, because meaning breathes in pauses. 7. Truth, because deception devours trust. 8. Reciprocity, because giving completes receiving. 9. Grace, because forgiveness is fertile. 10. Courage, because evolution requires it. Display them where you write, speak, or think. Let them become mantras. Words repeated become worlds revealed. Toward the language of liberation, to reclaim the word is to reclaim the world. Not by shouting down others, but by speaking up for coherence. Not by silencing opposition, but by embodying integrity. The liberated tongue does not coerce, it connects. It doesn't dominate, it dances. When your speech and body align, when tone and truth intertwine, you become ungovernable by deception. No propaganda can penetrate presence. The revolution begins in vocabulary and ends in vibration. Speak as if the future listens. Because it does. Revolt is not only what we shout in the streets, it's what we whisper into our own hearts when no one is watching. Reclamation begins the moment we notice a word that no longer fits and dare to lay it down. We've traveled through chants and codes, graffiti and hashtags, inner rebellions and reconstructed tongues. Each step has peeled away a layer of imposed meaning until at last we stand before the quiet question. What words have freed me, and which once bound me? This reflection is not an audit of guilt, but a reckoning of gratitude, a pause to recognize the phrases that built scaffolds for your becoming, and those that caged you until you outgrew them. Take a slow breath. Let memory drift across the decades of your life, and listen for the echoes. The childhood label that clipped your wings, the rallying cry that sparked your courage, the gentle sentence that mended a fracture, the unspoken phrase you finally voiced. Each carries residue, emotional, somatic, spiritual. To name them is to reclaim them. The linguistic ledger. Imagine your life as a balance sheet written in ink and heartbeat. Assets, words that enriched you. List the utterances that brought clarity, compassion, and coherence. These might include you can, empowerment. I see you, recognition. I'm sorry, repair. Thank you, reciprocity. I love you, expansion. Notice where you feel these in your body, the warmth in the chest, the unclenching in the gut, the steadiness in breath. These are deposits in the bank of meaning, interest accrued through integrity. Liabilities, words that indebted you now, gently trace the phrases that drained energy or distorted truth. Be quiet when you needed to speak. You're too much when you were overflowing with life. That's just how it is when you sensed injustice. Because I said so when you sought understanding. Observe their residual tension behind the eyes, shallowness of inhale, the impulse to shrink. These are linguistic debts inherited from fear. Acknowledging them is the first payment toward liberation. When you finish, hold both lists before you. Whisper gratitude to the assets, forgiveness to the liabilities, and close the ledger with compassion. Balance, after all, is not erasure but integration. Declaration of inner independence now. Write your own manifesto, not against a government, but against internal tyranny. Title it, My Declaration of Inner Independence. In it, affirm 1. Your sovereignty. I claim authority over the words that define me. 2. Your integrity. I will speak only what aligns with the truth felt in body and soul. 3. Your responsibility. I will wield language as a tool of healing, not harm. 4. Your solidarity. I honor the voices of others, especially the silenced. 5. Your imagination. I pledge to invent new words when old ones no longer serve. Read it aloud. Feel the vibration in your throat, the resonance of reclaimed power. This is not performance, it is proclamation. You are drafting the constitution of your consciousness. Embodied seal, close your eyes. Place a hand over your heart, another on your abdomen. Breathe through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 6. As breath settles, whisper a single word that encapsulates your freedom, perhaps truth, presence, courage, or one uniquely yours. Let the sound hum through bone and skin until silence returns. The nervous system recognizes vows spoken from coherence. In that stillness, the declaration is ratified. Your body signs the treaty your mouth composed. The long echo of liberation language, like any revolution, is never finished. Each generation inherits the rubble and the resonances, deciding anew which structures to rebuild, which syllables to resurrect, which spells to retire. We are all translators of freedom, turning experience into expression, pain into pattern, silence into song. and every honest word spoken today becomes ancestral guidance tomorrow. As you step beyond this episode, remember, every conversation is a small parliament. Every metaphor is a manifesto. Every pause is a protest against haste. Every act of listening is a vote for peace. To speak kindly is to echo the earth. To listen deeply is to let the earth echo back. You do not need a megaphone to be a revolutionary. Sometimes the most subversive act is a calm nervous system, a measured sentence, a refusal to mirror madness. Carry forward the practices we've gathered: discernment, tasting words before serving them; coherence, aligning tone, truth, and tissue; creativity, forging fresh phrases for futures worth inhabiting; compassion, remembering that every dialect of pain hides a desire for safety. These are the dialects of liberation. They cost nothing, yet revalue everything. The circle continues. As we turn toward our next exploration, the path bends from uprising to underground. If revolt reshapes the present, memory guards the past. Beneath the noise of empires lie whispers of forgotten tongues, languages once banned, buried, or declared blasphemy, yet still breathing through myth, ritual, and dream. Next time, we'll descend into that archive of echoes, to listen for syllables erased by conquest, but preserved in chant, to taste sounds once deemed forbidden, to ask whether the so-called dead languages are truly silent or merely sleeping. Episode 22 is titled The Esoteric Tongue, Forgotten and Forbidden Languages. We'll explore glossolalia and Enochian, Sumerian hymns and spirit scripts, and consider whether these arcane lexicons might still hum beneath our modern speech, faint harmonics of humanity's earliest enchantments. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Until next time, stay rooted in truth, and let your voice grow where silence once stood. You've been listening to the Linguaverse. I'm James Miller.